Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So you guys may have noticed that over the last couple of years, Eddie Hearn has become more and more vocal when it comes to his personal views, and especially when it comes to boxers that don't even fight for DAZN, that really have no affiliation with Eddie Hearn. In fact, it seems like the more Eddie Hearn's comments fly under the radar, the more audacious his comments become. And what he just said about Gervonta Tank Davis is a prime example of that. After Gervonta Tank Davis gets the biggest win of his career, knocking out the previously undefeated Hector Garcia, who was the junior lightweight champion, Gervonta also broke records when it came to his fight against Hector Garcia last weekend. The event became the highest grossing event at Capital One Arena. And when I say the highest grossing event, I mean of any kind in the 25-year history of Capital One Arena. So that includes basketball games. That includes concerts. Matter of fact, the Rolling Stones, they previously held the record until Gervonta Tank Davis broke their record. So after an extremely successful Saturday night for Gervonta Tank Davis, Eddie Hearn, he responds to the success by saying this about Gervonta. This is what Eddie Hearn said on the DAZN podcast show. And before I play this clip, I want you guys to notice Eddie actually builds up to saying what he wants to say about Gervonta Tank Davis. Almost like he was thinking about it for a while before he said it, and he just said, man, forget it. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Check out this clip.
See, the one dangerous thing about Gervonta Davis is I don't think that sort of stuff ever affects him, really. You know, like any normal human being, having gone through what he went through in the last couple of weeks, probably would have just called the fight off, firstly, because like he's making weight, and then obviously most people would just go off the boil and like just eat something and then like just implode. But the dangerous thing about Gervonta Davis, and this is one of the things that makes him as dangerous as he is he's not a deep thinker. You know, he's not an articulate young man. You know, he's a bad kid. Like, and I say that, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm talking about, this is a kid. He's a bad right? Just like Mike Tyson was, just like some of these other greats were. And that makes them very, very dangerous.
Okay, so first of all, Eddie Hearn, he is receiving a lot of backlash from those remarks, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later on in this video. But I have to say, this is the first time I have ever heard a boxing promoter call a boxer inarticulate. Now understand this, if Eddie Hearn was a professor of English, then it would make a little bit more sense for him to grade someone's articulation. But Eddie is a boxing promoter. And the question that they actually asked Eddie Hearn was, what was your assessment on Gervonta Tank Davis' performance? And Eddie Hearn calls Gervonta Tank Davis inarticulate and says that he's not a deep thinker. And that's what makes him so dangerous? First of all, if you're going to say something like that, what does a person being inarticulate have to do with being dangerous? Eddie said what partially makes him dangerous is he is not an articulate young man. I mean, who says that? Have you ever heard someone say, hey, you know, that guy right there is dangerous right there because he's illiterate. He can't read or write. That's part of what makes him so dangerous, because he's not a deep thinker. I mean, what's so dangerous about him? You're afraid that he's going to end up becoming the president of the United States because you claim that he's inarticulate? Actually, we've had presidents in this country that were completely illiterate, could not read or write. President Andrew Johnson was one of them. This entire country was ran by a man that was illiterate. So could that possibly be what Eddie Hearn was talking about when he said that this man is inarticulate and that's part of what makes him so dangerous? Listen, man, I haven't even gotten deep yet. I mean, we all know what time it is, but it's just so much to unpack when it comes to what Eddie Hearn said that I got to break every little point down. Once again, Eddie Hearn, he says he's inarticulate. That's part of what makes him so dangerous. Then he tries to balance it out by saying, look, he's a bad MFer, right? He's like Mike Tyson. But while he's calling him inarticulate, he then says, oh, but not in a disrespectful way. Normally when a person has to finish his point by saying, oh, but not in a disrespectful way, they say that because they already know some people will feel disrespected from what he just said. Because you know deep down in your heart, if it wasn't meant to be disrespectful, you wouldn't even have to tell people you meant no disrespect when you said it. Those are called condescending racial undertones. You guys remember when Floyd Mayweather beat Manny Pacquiao, right? And I remember my son, he went to school after that weekend. He came home and he told me that his teacher in the middle of the class just randomly said to everyone that Floyd Mayweather can't read, with like a smirk on his face. So the translation is similar to what Eddie Hearn just said about Gervonta Tank Davis. He's basically saying, yeah, you're a bad MFer. Yeah, you're a great boxer. You might go down as the greatest. And yeah, you just beat the guy that I was praying would beat you. But it doesn't matter because in my eyes, you're still a this and a that. And you guys can fill in the blanks. But instead of saying what they really want to say, they say something like, oh, but you can't read. Oh, but you're inarticulate. Oh, but you're not a deep thinker. Manny Pacquiao dropped out of school at the age of 14. How many times have you ever heard anyone in the sport of boxing talk about how uneducated Manny Pacquiao is? Have you ever heard a promoter or anyone significant in the sport of boxing do an interview where the reporter asked him, what was your assessment on Manny Pacquiao's performance? And that person's response is, you know what makes Manny Pacquiao so dangerous? Is he's so uneducated. He's not a deep thinker. I'll give you guys a fun fact. The fact that Manny Pacquiao dropped out of high school, didn't have that much of an education, is part of the reason why he got completely blown out when he tried to run for president of the Philippines. The country loved and idolized Manny Pacquiao as a boxer, but they felt he didn't have the education or experience to run the entire country. You know who else dropped out of high school around the same age Manny Pacquiao did? Canelo Alvarez. And we've never obviously heard Eddie Hearn or anyone else talk about Canelo Alvarez dropping out of high school. Why? Because it's irrelevant to his boxing career. You guys have never heard me do a breakdown, a post-fight video, where the main thing I'm talking about is how uneducated Canelo or Manny Pacquiao are. And that's what makes them so dangerous. You know what's so ironic is usually it's the educated people, the higher educated people that are considered more dangerous. They're considered more of a threat because they are so intelligent. When it came to slavery, it was the slaves that knew how to read that were considered dangerous, not the ones that didn't know how to read, right? Speaking of slavery, let me give you a little bit more of Eddie Hearn's background. So Eddie Hearn, he followed in his father's footsteps when it comes to being a boxing promoter. His father was a boxing promoter as well, still is actually, I think. It wasn't that long ago. It was probably only a couple years ago that Barry Hearn, he made serious headlines where he received a little bit of backlash the same way his son Eddie is receiving it today. Barry was promoting a Dillian White fight, sitting right next to Dillian White, and then he uses this slavery reference.
Arrangement with Dillian White. Isn't that weird? Why do we have... He's not tied up like the slave contract of yesteryear. When I was running boxing, it was much easier. We were slave traders. We had these guys and they were working for us and we was the boss. The pendulum has swung. Now I have to say, Mr. Dillian White.
So not to be confused, that was Barry Hearn talking, not Eddie. And you could hear the uncomfortable, awkward chuckles, almost as if someone was surprised that he actually said that on the microphone. Just think about this for a second. If Barry Hearn was comfortable enough and bold enough to say something like that, not only sitting right next to a black man, but saying it on a microphone to the entire boxing world. If he's bold enough to say something like that to the boxing world, what type of private conversations does Barry Hearn have with Eddie Hearn and other people behind closed doors? Because what Barry just said right there on that microphone was something that a white supremacist would say. Now, I'm sure you guys have already heard by now, and I'm gonna make a separate video on it, but Leonard Ellerby, he came out and he called Eddie Hearn a racist. He called him a privileged racist. So now people are calling both Barry Hearn and Eddie Hearn racist. You know, when I was a teenager, I used to be extremely optimistic, thinking that racist people are gonna die out. Like, I used to think that racist people were just the older generation. I thought it would be out with the old, in with the new. And the new generation, they would no longer be racist. But what I didn't anticipate at that very young age is that racism is passed down from generation to generation, which is what we see in the sport of boxing and everywhere else outside of boxing every single day. You guys have heard me say on numerous occasions, boxing is based on race, nationality, and pride in that order. You guys may recall Terrence Crawford, when he left Top Rank, he sued Bob Arum for what? For racial bias, right? And I remember I thought it was extremely strange that Terrence Crawford, who is pound for pound the best fighter in the world, knocks out everyone. He's a free agent. And I remember Eddie Hearn saying, we're not interested. Like, basically, we don't want him over here. We can't do anything for him. I thought that was really, really strange. I had never seen that happen before, where you have someone, once again, who's considered pound for pound the best fighter in the world, and Eddie Hearn is saying he has no interest in signing him. And when he says he has no interest, he's not just talking about him personally. He's saying DAZN has no interest. And we had heard reports that Terrence Crawford was thinking about going over to DAZN just to get completely rejected. And I remember Eddie Hearn talking about it, and he was saying, you know, we heard he's going to be difficult. You know, I heard what Bob Arum said about him not selling tickets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, he admitted that it's the promoter's job, because he was talking about Bob Arum. He admitted it's the promoter's job to promote the fight, to make him a big draw. We know that when it comes to Terrence Crawford, he's 3-4 times bigger than Bam Bam Rodriguez. And Eddie Hearn promotes Bam Bam Rodriguez. There are plenty of times where Terrence Crawford had did more views than anyone in the entire year on any network when it comes to a boxing event. And this is when Terrence Crawford was with Bob Arum, was with Top Rank. Eddie Hearn said we couldn't do anything for Terrence Crawford because all the welterweights fight on PBC. But that wasn't true, because Virgil Ortiz fights on DAZN. And Virgil Ortiz coincidentally happens to be Terrence Crawford's #1 contender right now. So it didn't add up at all. Now when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis, who is the new face of boxing right now, because there is no fighter that can go to almost any state and sell out arenas, break records almost every time he fights. So with all that success when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis, and Eddie Hearn is asked to give his assessment on Gervonta's performance, and Eddie Hearn calls this man inarticulate and says he's not a deep thinker, and that's part of what makes him so dangerous. I've always told you guys, the more dominant a black fighter is, the more of a threat he becomes, the more dangerous he becomes. I got more to say when it comes to this topic, but I got to wrap this one up for now, so I'm on to the next one, y'all. All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, fever blisters, diabetic ulcers, this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called LO Deki Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to lodeki.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram. Let me tell you guys about Issa Israel Law Firm. It is a full-service legal practice based in Denver, Colorado, an emerging hub for combat sports and high-altitude training. If you're a fighter inside or outside of the ring and you need a law firm you can trust to fight for you, visit thefighterfirm.com or email help@iilawfirm.com. Legal representation is usually limited to plaintiffs or defendants in Colorado, but iFirm can help anyone in the world with trademarking their business name, logos, and U.S. immigration issues. This brother has been my attorney for a while and helped guide me through all kinds of business and civil issues, so make sure you guys go to thefighterfirm.com.